Did he really just fall? The sound of glass shattering echoed across the marble floors, and Emma Collins froze, her hand halfway to the twins who were screaming in terror. Dominic Rourke, the Mafia boss whose name alone could silence a room, lay sprawled unnaturally on the ground, his fiancée frantic beside him, shouting and tugging at the children, every heartbeat in the room suddenly amplified. Emma's eyes scanned the scene, the chandeliers swaying slightly above, reflecting shards of light across the polished surfaces, each glint catching her attention like a warning. She moved forward cautiously, her white blouse crisp, zip red cutting sharply against her skin, a stark contrast to the chaos around her. The twins clutched each other, their small bodies trembling, and she reached down, whispering, stay calm," trying to soothe them as her own heart raced. Dominic's eyes flickered, subtle but deliberate, and Emma knew instantly that the accident was not what it seemed. A vase had toppled, water spilling across the Persian rug, and a small corner of the rug was slightly lifted, a detail no one else had noticed. Her instincts screamed, pay attention, notice everything. She crouched closer, her fingers brushing the rug, noting the anomaly, her mind racing, connecting dots that were invisible to everyone else. The fiancé stepped toward her, suspicion sharp in her voice, but Emma did not flinch. Her focus remained on the twins, on Dominic, on the subtle cues that hinted at the truth. Another sound, a drawer sliding, a door creak, pulled her attention momentarily, a micro twist in the tension that made her pulse spike. Dominic slowly shifted, his movement deliberate, testing reactions, commanding without speaking, his presence a silent assertion of power. Emma straightened, glancing at the twins again, their eyes wide, trust placed entirely in her hands. She took a breath, steadying herself, calculating her next move, aware that one wrong step could unravel everything. The chandelier caught her peripheral vision again, a shadow moving, suggesting secrets hidden in plain sight, each flicker of light a micro cliffhanger, a tease of revelations to come. The fiancé's voice rose in frustration, demanding answers, yet Emma's gaze never wavered from the subtle details that told the real story. Dominic's lips curved ever so slightly, an unreadable expression, and Emma felt the weight of understanding pressing down, the knowledge that she had stepped into a world where every action was observed, every reaction measured. The twins' grip on her skirt tightened, their fear palpable, and she whispered reassurance, her own voice trembling with adrenaline, carrying both authority and empathy. Time seemed to stretch, each second loaded with potential, tension escalating, the room charged with unspoken threats and the silent pull of danger. A glint in the corner of her eye, a shadow shifting, hinted at a new secret, something Dominic had left hidden, and Emma's mind raced to anticipate, to prepare, to protect. Every element, every sound, every flicker of movement became part of the story she needed to understand, every detail a clue in the web of power and deception. She felt the invisible thread connecting her to Dominic, a force of control and authority, balanced against her determination to shield the twins. The room held its breath, the chandeliers swaying, water glistening on the floor, the faint scent of tension thick in the air. Emma took another step, careful, deliberate, sensing that the next moment could shift everything, that the fragile balance might tip with a single motion. And just as a distant clock ticked, a new sound from the far corridor hinted at developments yet unseen, leaving her, and everyone in the room, on edge, knowing the real story had only just begun. Emma Collins pressed a hand to the twins' shoulders, guiding them toward the hallway, her mind racing with every detail she had observed, each glint of light and shadow now a clue in a puzzle she did not yet fully understand. Dominic Rourke rose to his feet with a deliberate calm that contrasted sharply against the chaos surrounding him, his eyes sharp, calculating, as if measuring every heartbeat, every twitch of muscle in the room. The twins clung to Emma, their breathing ragged, yet she could sense a growing courage in them, a reflection of her own rising determination. The fiancée stepped back, frustration visible in every tense line of her body, suspicion and fear mixing in her expression, while Dominic's gaze never left Emma, unspoken communication passing silently between them. A slight movement near the doorway caught Emma's attention, a small detail she might have overlooked in any other moment, a corner of a rug lifted, a vase just slightly askew, hints that the scene had been manipulated, orchestrated. She felt the weight of realization pressing down, adrenaline heightening her senses, the room shrinking into a concentrated focus where every sound, every breath, every whisper mattered. Dominic's voice broke the tense silence, low and controlled, questioning yet commanding, making the twins flinch, making Emma's pulse spike. The rhythm of the house suddenly aligned to the subtle shifts of power he radiated. She inhaled sharply, whispering reassurances, testing the reaction of the children while keeping her mind sharp for the next move. A sound from upstairs, a floorboard creak, the soft scrape of a shoe, made her heart leap, a micro cliffhanger she could not ignore, as if the house itself held its breath in anticipation. Emma moved deliberately, scanning each surface, noting the reflections in the polished floors, the way light fractured against the walls, each reflection a potential clue, each shadow a possible concealment. The twins' small hands gripped hers tightly, a lifeline, an anchor, and she understood instinctively that she had to act, to navigate the delicate balance between discovery and protection. Dominic's subtle shift, the tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes, hinted at unspoken consequences, a silent test of her perception and courage. She adjusted the twins' position, crouching slightly, whispering directions, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart, while simultaneously scanning for anything that could betray the truth behind the staged accident. The fiancé's sharp intake of breath and sudden movement toward the twins introduced a spike in tension, Emma pivoting, her body tense and ready, creating a small but decisive space of control around the children. A glimmer of metal on the sideboard, a shadow stretching across the polished floor, hinted at a secret yet unrevealed, and Emma's instincts screamed at her to investigate, yet maintain protection. Dominic advanced a single step, deliberate, powerful, his presence an unspoken assertion, testing her composure, testing the twins' trust in her. The room held a fragile balance, every object, every movement, every glance amplifying the pressure, each micro-twist driving Emma to focus with unrelenting intensity, her senses sharpening. As the chandelier swayed again, casting fractured light across the floor, a soft click from the far side suggested a new element in play, a hidden layer in the orchestration, leaving Emma and the twins suspended on the edge of realization, the next moment poised to reveal more than they anticipated. Emma Collins' eyes darted from the twins to Dominic Rourke, every instinct screaming that the next moment would determine who held control, her heart hammering as the room seemed to contract around them. The twins clung to her, their small hands pressing into her sleeves, eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity, and Emma whispered reassurances that carried the weight of her own rising courage. Dominic moved closer, deliberate, his presence commanding, yet there was a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of calculation, hinting at knowledge unspoken, a test she had not anticipated. Emma adjusted her stance, shifting slightly to shield the twins, her mind racing through possibilities, every shadow, every glint of light, every reflection now a potential signal, a clue to unravel the carefully orchestrated scene. The fiancée's impatience grew, her steps sharp on the polished floor, eyes narrowing, tension crackling in the air like electricity, and Emma felt the invisible pressure of scrutiny, of stakes rising with every heartbeat. A faint creak upstairs drew Emma's attention, a sound so soft it could have been missed, yet it carried the weight of warning, a micro cliffhanger demanding vigilance. Dominic's gaze remained locked on her, unyielding, his fingers brushing the edge of the table in a motion that spoke more than words ever could, the room thick with anticipation. Emma's mind processed the micro-tensions, the subtle sway of the chandelier, the slight shift of a picture frame, the way a beam of sunlight fractured across the floor, and she realized how precarious their positions were, how thin the line between discovery and safety could be. The twins whispered questions, tiny voices that trembled with concern, and Emma bent down, her own voice steady yet carrying urgency, explaining that everything would be okay while knowing that she had only begun to understand the layers of deception in the house. Dominic's lips pressed into a thin line, a signal that he acknowledged her awareness without revealing his intentions, a silent exchange loaded with power and implication. Every detail in the room, the tilt of a chair, the angle of a lamp, the glint on a silver tray, was part of a larger narrative, each one amplifying the stakes, each one pressing Emma to act with precision and care. Her pulse quickened as she recognized a pattern in the subtle inconsistencies, the shadows where someone had deliberately hidden a truth, the faint scent of something out of place that whispered secrets of the staged accident. Dominic stepped forward just enough to test her response, and the twins huddled closer, sensing tension but unaware of the hidden dynamics at play. Emma's hand brushed a small object on the floor, revealing a clue that changed the entire frame of the situation, a revelation that promised to shift the balance of power. The fiancé's sudden exclamation punctuated the air, heightening the urgency, and Emma realized that every second now carried consequence, every motion a potential trigger. Her eyes met Dominic's once more, understanding flickering between them, a mutual recognition of the delicate game unfolding, and the room seemed to pulse with anticipation, each breath heavy with unspoken questions and emerging truths. And then, in a corner, hidden from immediate view, a piece of evidence caught the light, suggesting that someone else had been here before them, leaving a mark, a signal, a hidden truth waiting to be discovered. Emma Collins felt the room tighten around her as Dominic Rourke took another step forward, his presence dominating every inch of space, each movement precise and deliberate, radiating control and authority. The twins pressed closer to her, tiny bodies trembling, and she whispered again, trying to steady their breathing, yet feeling her own pulse thundering against her ribs. Dominic's eyes locked on her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine, the silent assessment in his gaze making her every instinct sharpen, every decision carry weight. The fiancé's voice broke through the tension, sharp and questioning, yet Emma remained focused, noticing the subtle shifts in Dominic's posture, the tilt of his head, the faint twitch of his hand as if signaling a hidden expectation, a test she could not ignore. A soft click from the far hallway caught her attention, a sound that could have been mundane but carried the weight of implication, a micro cliffhanger that tightened her chest and demanded immediate reaction. Emma bent slightly, positioning herself between the twins and the center of attention, scanning the floor, the furniture, the reflections in the glass surfaces for anything out of place. The chandelier above swayed, sending fragmented light across the room, illuminating small inconsistencies, a tipped vase, a slightly ajar drawer, hints that the staged accident was layered with hidden intentions. Dominic's voice cut the air, low, controlled, asking questions without words, commanding presence without movement, the atmosphere thick with unspoken consequences. Emma's mind raced, calculating risk, measuring trust, balancing protection of the children with the need to understand the hidden narrative unfolding around her. The twins looked up, sensing the gravity of her attention, their small hands tightening around her sleeves, their wide eyes reflecting fear and reliance, anchoring Emma to her responsibility. Another sound, a soft brush along the corridor, pulled her focus, suggesting someone else might be present, a shadow moving unseen, heightening the stakes, a sudden twist she had to anticipate. Dominic's lips pressed into a firm line, his subtle nod acknowledging awareness without revealing intention, a silent power struggle that tested her perception and courage. Emma's gaze flicked to the fiancé, who fumbled for control, frustration sharpening her movements, and Emma realized that every action, every reaction, could shift the balance entirely, every second now laden with consequence. The air felt dense, each breath heavy, charged with anticipation, and Emma sensed that the real challenge was no longer the twins' immediate safety but deciphering the layers of manipulation, understanding Dominic's intentions, and making a decision that could define the outcome. A glimmer of silver on a sideboard reflected a new possibility, an overlooked clue, a subtle shift that demanded attention and immediate choice. Emma crouched slightly, weighing her options, the twins' murmurs blending with the quiet tension of the room, the chandelier above marking the passage of seconds that felt like hours. Dominic stepped forward once more, just enough to assert presence, to test resolve, and the twins flinched, pressing closer, trusting her implicitly. The fiancé's exasperated gasp punctuated the silence, a reminder of the scrutiny pressing down, yet Emma's focus did not waver. Every reflection, every shadow, every minute detail carried significance, and Emma knew that her next move would either unravel the hidden agenda or protect the fragile trust she maintained. As Dominic's eyes held hers with measured intensity, a soft sound from the distant hall hinted at an arrival, an unseen observer perhaps, a hidden truth on the brink of revelation, forcing Emma to make a choice that could change everything in the house, and in that moment, she realized that one decision now would alter the path of everyone present. Emma Collins took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the twins' hands as she realized the full weight of the situation. Dominic Rourke stepped closer, his presence commanding and precise, yet in that instant, there was a subtle shift in his expression, a recognition of her awareness, an acknowledgement that she had begun to see the truth behind his carefully constructed facade. The twins leaned into her, their small bodies trembling but trusting, eyes wide, watching every subtle movement, every blink, every twitch of muscle, sensing the power dynamics swirling around them. Emma's mind raced, weighing risk against the urgent need to protect them, her heart beating in sync with the tension that charged the air. Dominic's gaze held hers, unyielding, yet in that silent exchange she detected something unexpected, a trace of reliance, a flicker of vulnerability buried beneath his controlled exterior. The chandelier above swayed gently, casting fractured patterns across the polished floor, reflections of the intricate dance of perception and deception. The fiancée's agitation grew, voice sharp, breaking the fragile rhythm of the room, but Emma remained focused, her attention splitting between shielding the children and decoding Dominic's intent. A soft click from the sideboard drew her eyes, a minor inconsistency, a misaligned object, a clue to the orchestrated scene, and her pulse surged as she realized the stakes had shifted. Dominic took another step, deliberately close, yet not threatening, and Emma felt a new connection form, the understanding that her courage, her perception, her instinct could influence his actions, that she was no longer merely an observer. The twins whispered questions, tiny voices that trembled, and she knelt, her words calm yet firm, guiding them, instilling a sense of security, while simultaneously acknowledging the unspoken tension between herself and Dominic. Light from the windows fractured across the walls, illuminating the subtle signs of deception, each shadow, each reflection a micro-twist, keeping Emma and the twins on edge, every movement a signal, every glance a test. Dominic's lips pressed into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement of her growing influence, and Emma realized the balance of power had begun to shift, however slightly, their fates intertwined in an unspoken pact of observation, perception, and cautious trust. The fiancée's sharp inhale punctuated the moment, a reminder of the scrutiny pressing down on them, yet Emma held her stance, eyes scanning the room, heart steadying, aware that every choice she made now would alter the unfolding story. A faint creak from the staircase above signaled another presence, subtle but significant, introducing a new layer of complexity, a decision point that demanded immediate response. Emma adjusted the twins, positioning herself to intercept. To analyze, to understand, her mind alert to every subtle cue, every hint of intent in Dominic's posture, every micro-expression that suggested what was expected, what was possible. The tension coiled tighter, each breath heavy, charged with anticipation, and she sensed the moment had arrived to make a choice, a single decisive action that could redefine their interactions, the power dynamic, and the unfolding secrets of the house. And as Dominic's shadow stretched across the floor toward her, Emma realized that one decision now would pivot the direction of everything, a choice that would reveal hidden truths and force the narrative into a new, unforeseen trajectory. Emma Collins felt her chest tighten as the room seemed to close in, every reflection on the marble floor a reminder of the stakes she could not afford to misjudge, the twins' small hands clutching hers, their trust absolute, pressing her into a decision she could not delay. Dominic Rourke advanced slowly, his presence commanding, each step measured yet radiating unspoken challenge, a silent question: could she navigate the hidden intentions without faltering? Emma's eyes darted from the faint shadows in the corner to the subtle shift of light on the chandelier, catching details she had not noticed before, each fragment of glass and glint a clue that amplified the tension, her pulse racing with anticipation. The fiancée stepped closer, her movements sharp, accusatory, yet Emma did not flinch, focusing instead on the twins' frightened expressions, whispering calm, guiding them while keeping her senses alert to Dominic's every gesture. A soft, almost imperceptible creak from the floor above drew Emma's attention, signaling another presence, or an unexpected development, and her heart jumped as the room filled with unspoken pressure, a micro cliffhanger hanging in every breath. Dominic's gaze intensified, his lips pressed in, yet there was a flicker in his eyes, an acknowledgement of her rising awareness, a subtle shift in their dynamic, and Emma realized that power was no longer absolute, that influence could be claimed with courage and perception. She adjusted the twins' positions, crouching slightly, moving with precision, her mind mapping the room, assessing every potential consequence, feeling the weight of responsibility press on her shoulders. The air seemed charged, every sound amplified, the soft clatter of a vase, the whisper of the twins' breathing, the fiancé's sharp intake of breath, and Emma's attention was split between observation and protection, each micro-moment a potential pivot, each glance a decision that could ripple across the fragile balance. Dominic took another careful step, closing distance without aggression, testing her resolve, and Emma's breath caught as she realized the subtle tension between them had shifted, the silent acknowledgement of capability, of intuition, of control, threading through the air. She scanned the sideboard, noticing a silver edge glinting in the fractured light, a detail overlooked, a clue hidden in plain sight, and the twins shivered, sensing her hesitation and determination simultaneously. Emma's mind raced, calculating, anticipating, aware that the room held its collective breath, that the next movement could reveal truth or danger, that every subtle action carried consequence. The chandelier above swayed slightly again, shadows shifting across walls and floors, highlighting inconsistencies that were impossible to ignore, every reflection a potential revelation, every sound a signal of unfolding risk. Dominic's posture remained deliberate, commanding yet restrained, a silent measure of control and expectation, and Emma understood the fragile equilibrium had tilted. She had stepped further into a world where courage and perception could redefine authority. As she moved to secure the twins closer, a sudden metallic click echoed from behind the door, sharp and unexpected, a sound that promised revelation or immediate consequence, drawing Emma's full attention and marking the threshold of a turning point where the next decision would escalate the stakes beyond anything she had faced so far. Emma Collins' breath caught as the room seemed to pulse with every heartbeat, the twins clinging tighter to her sides, their small hands trembling yet trusting, their eyes wide as they followed her every movement. Dominic Rourke stepped closer, deliberate, measured, and the intensity of his presence pressed against her like a physical weight, yet in that pressure, a subtle acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition of her courage and perception. The fiancé's voice rose sharply, demanding attention, questioning, a spark that ignited the tension further, but Emma's focus did not waver, her senses stretched to capture every detail, the tilt of a vase, the glint of light on the chandelier, the soft shadows shifting across the floor, and in those fragments, she saw the truth lurking behind the staged accident. A sudden creak from the upstairs hallway snapped her attention upward, a micro cliffhanger that sent adrenaline rushing through her veins, while Dominic's eyes followed her every move, measuring, calculating, testing her responses in silence. Emma bent slightly, pulling the twins closer, whispering calm, steady words that belied her own rising heartbeat, while simultaneously assessing the room, the placement of every object, and the hidden patterns in Dominic's posture. The air seemed dense, thick with anticipation, each breath heavy with consequence, each sound amplified as the chandelier swayed again, casting fractured light across the polished floor, highlighting inconsistencies that demanded immediate attention. Dominic's lips pressed in, a silent communication of expectation, authority, and the stakes hanging on every choice Emma made. Her mind raced, the weight of responsibility pressing down, the realization that one decision could redefine trust, power, and safety striking with clarity. The twins whispered softly, their voices a tether to reality and to her own courage, and Emma adjusted her stance, crouching slightly, calculating the optimal path between protection and discovery. The fiancé's sharp gasp punctuated the tension, a reminder that scrutiny and consequence were ever present, yet Emma's gaze remained fixed on the details that revealed hidden truths. Dominic shifted subtly, closing the distance with careful intent, asserting presence without aggression, forcing Emma to navigate the fragile balance of observation, influence, and careful control. Light fractured across the walls, glinting off a small metallic object Emma had not noticed before, a clue that hinted at layers of deception she had yet to unravel, a tangible marker of hidden intent. Emma's fingers brushed the object lightly, realizing instantly the implications, and in that instant she understood the precariousness of her position, the risk inherent in every motion, every glance, every whisper. The room seemed to pulse with silent electricity, the twins' small hands gripping her sleeves as if sensing the shifting currents of power, their trust binding her to action. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, acknowledging her recognition without revealing his hand, and the weight of the moment coalesced into a tense equilibrium where observation, perception, and courage intersected. A faint click echoed from the distant corner, sharp and deliberate, pulling attention like a magnet, a signal that someone or something had changed the conditions, and Emma realized the choice before her had escalated into a decisive turning point, one that would dictate the next movement, the next revelation, and the unfolding path of danger and understanding, leaving the room suspended on the edge of imminent consequence. Emma Collins sank slightly to the floor, her legs trembling as the weight of the previous moments pressed heavily on her chest, the twins clinging to her side with wide eyes, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the fragile trust between them stretched thin. Dominic Rourke's presence loomed, unyielding, yet there was a subtle shift in his posture, a quiet acknowledgement that the room's balance had irrevocably changed, that Emma's choices had left a permanent mark on the unfolding events. The fiancée's voice cracked with frustration, slicing through the dense tension, yet Emma remained still, her senses sharpening to every detail, the uneven tilt of a picture frame, the faint sound of a door latch shifting, the shimmer of light along the polished floor, each fragment of the room now a signal, a warning. Emma's gaze swept over the twins, their small hands trembling, and she felt the full weight of responsibility, the understanding that her decisions had consequences she could not undo. A shadow moved subtly in the corner, barely noticeable, yet it carried the pressure of unseen eyes, hinting at developments yet to reveal themselves. Dominic stepped forward slowly, measured, every movement a question, a test, an assertion of power, and Emma realized that their relationship had shifted. She was no longer simply reacting, but influencing, her presence altering the dynamics in ways both dangerous and profound. The twins whispered softly, the sound grounding her, yet intensifying the gravity of the situation, their innocence contrasted sharply against the calculated tension radiating from Dominic. Emma adjusted her stance, lifting her chin slightly, the air thick around them, charged with the silent electricity of consequence, and each breath felt heavier than the last. A sudden clatter from the sideboard pulled her attention. An object moved, a hidden detail now exposed, signaling that someone had left a mark, a trace that demanded immediate interpretation, a micro cliffhanger that spiked her pulse. Dominic's eyes narrowed, observing, calculating, as if he had anticipated her recognition, and the room seemed to contract, compressing each heartbeat into a measure of suspense. Emma's mind raced, connecting fragments, interpreting reflections, sensing the pressure of choices past converging with the potential outcomes of her next move. The twins shifted closer, their eyes wide with fear and trust, and she whispered instructions, steadying their breathing, embedding calm in the chaos while simultaneously bracing for the consequences rippling outward from every action they had taken. Light fractured across the walls from the swaying chandelier, highlighting inconsistencies, casting shadows that hinted at secrets still hidden, amplifying the awareness that the environment itself had become a character, an active participant in the unfolding tension. Dominic's lips pressed in a firm line, the silent authority in his presence asserting the cost of inattention, the necessity of precision, and Emma understood that she was navigating a threshold beyond which there could be no reversal. A faint metallic sound, deliberate and soft, echoed from the far hallway, a reminder that the unseen consequences were closing in, a subtle prelude to revelation, and in that suspended silence, Emma felt the weight of inevitability pressing against her, knowing the next moment would carry a truth not yet fully disclosed, leaving the room poised on the edge of revelation and anticipation. Emma Collins' eyes narrowed as she sensed a shift in the atmosphere, the weight of the room changing subtly, a new tension threading through the air. Dominic Rourke's posture altered almost imperceptibly, a slight tilt of his head, a pause in his measured steps, signaling that he had noticed her awareness, that the balance of control was beginning to wobble. The twins clung to her sleeves, their soft breaths quickening, sensing the invisible currents that had shifted beneath their feet. Emma took a careful step forward, surveying the room, the tilted vase, the light fractured by the chandelier, every detail now a piece of a puzzle she could almost decipher. The fiancée's agitation intensified, her voice rising, a sharp contrast to the quiet, controlled tension emanating from Dominic, and Emma realized that the pressure now pressed equally upon all of them, yet she held a unique perspective, the understanding of hidden truths. A faint sound behind the wall drew her attention, subtle but distinct, a soft metallic click that suggested the presence of another element, unseen but influential, a micro cliffhanger that set her pulse racing. Dominic's eyes locked on hers, and in that gaze Emma felt the first real stir of leverage, a recognition that her insight and decisiveness could alter the expected flow of events. The twins whispered quietly, their small hands tightening around her, and she leaned down, steadying them, embedding a sense of security while gauging Dominic's reactions, aware that every movement carried consequence. The room seemed suspended, each breath heavy, every shadow and glint magnified by the tension, and Emma recognized that she had stepped into a position of subtle influence, a role that had not existed before. Her fingers brushed the edge of a small silver object on the sideboard, a detail previously unnoticed, and a sudden understanding hit her, a hidden message, a deliberate placement intended to be discovered at the right moment, revealing layers of orchestration she had not anticipated. Dominic stepped slightly closer, but instead of asserting dominance, he paused, observing, his calculated restraint amplifying the weight of the revelation. Emma's pulse quickened, realization dawning that the staged accident, the subtle manipulations, and the small cues had been designed to test perception, to measure courage, and now she held the evidence that could invert the power dynamic, if she chose wisely. The fiancée's voice cut sharply across the charged air, yet Emma's focus remained on the subtle signals, the silent narrative unfolding in shadows and reflections. Light from the chandelier fractured across the floor, highlighting a small corner that had been overlooked, and Emma saw clearly that the truth had been hidden in plain sight, a truth that could redefine Dominic's control and her own place in the room. Every micro-movement, every pause, every glance now held meaning, and Emma felt the first real surge of empowerment, the understanding that the next decision she made would not only reveal the secrets of the house but could entirely shift the balance of authority, leaving everyone in the room suspended on the precipice of unforeseen consequence. And at that moment, a door creaked slowly, revealing a clue that threatened to overturn all assumptions and redirect the unfolding story. Emma Collins' heart pounded as the room seemed to contract, every detail amplified, the twins' small hands gripping hers with silent desperation, their wide eyes reflecting the tension that had reached an unbearable peak. Dominic Rourke's presence was overwhelming, his gaze sharp, unflinching, assessing, and in that assessment, Emma felt the full weight of her choices, the consequences of each decision pressing down like the heavy chandelier above. The fiancée's voice cut through the thick air, urgent and piercing, yet Emma's focus remained unwavering, scanning every shadow, every glint of light, every subtle shift in posture that might reveal intention. A soft click echoed from the far corner, deliberate and precise, a signal that another layer of the house's secret design had activated, sending Emma's pulse racing, her mind snapping to attention. She crouched slightly, adjusting the twins closer to her, whispering calm instructions while her eyes never left Dominic, reading him, feeling the delicate balance teetering between control and revelation. Every breath she took was measured, yet each second carried the weight of imminent consequence, a micro cliffhanger that tightened the tension in the room. Dominic stepped forward, deliberate, powerful yet restrained, and Emma felt a shift, a subtle inversion of authority, the realization that her perception, her courage, her awareness had begun to influence the direction of events in ways she could not have predicted. Light fractured across the walls from the swinging chandelier, highlighting discrepancies, shadows that revealed hidden truths, and Emma's eyes caught a metallic edge peeking from beneath a drawer, a clue that had been placed with intent, now exposed, demanding recognition. The twins shivered, sensing the intensity, their trust anchoring her resolve, yet amplifying the stakes, every moment a test of her judgment. Dominic's lips pressed in a thin, deliberate line, a silent command and a measure of patience, his eyes narrowing slightly, acknowledging her growing agency without yielding dominance. Emma's mind raced, calculating, anticipating, aware that every small motion now had irreversible consequence, that hesitation or misstep could pivot the outcome entirely. The fiancée's sharp gasp punctuated the silent tension, each syllable a spike of urgency, but Emma's attention was fixed on the clues, on the patterns, on the subtle orchestration of the house itself, reading the language of hidden intentions. A faint shuffle from the hallway drew her focus, and she realized with a jolt that an unseen presence might alter everything, introducing unpredictability that demanded instant evaluation and action. Dominic's shadow stretched across the floor, a subtle yet potent reminder of the power he wielded, yet Emma felt the first true sense of leverage, the understanding that knowledge and perception could redefine influence. Her hand hovered over the metallic clue, the choice immediate, fraught with potential, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath, every heartbeat magnified, the air dense with anticipation. The chandeliers swayed once more, fracturing light across the twins' faces, reflecting both fear and trust, and Emma understood that the next motion, the next decision, would tip the scales completely, forcing a revelation that could change the course of everything, leaving the room suspended in a heartbeat before the final climax. Emma Collins exhaled slowly, her body sagging with the weight of every choice made, the twins leaning against her, their small hands clinging with quiet trust, their wide eyes reflecting relief and lingering tension. Dominic Rourke stepped back slightly, his posture less rigid, the sharp edge of authority softened by recognition of her courage and perception, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them that words could not capture. The fiancée remained tense, yet even she seemed to sense the resolution settling, a fragile equilibrium established in the aftermath of revelations and near discoveries. Emma's gaze swept over the room one final time, noting the displaced objects, the shadows, the fractured light from the chandelier, each detail a testament to the trials they had endured, each one reinforcing the intricate web of trust, caution, and understanding that now existed. Dominic's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering, yet softened by the awareness that she had earned her place within the delicate balance of the house, the twins' presence anchoring her influence and authority in a subtle but profound way. She straightened, guiding the children gently toward the center of the room, whispering calming words, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming in her veins, creating a sense of safety and reassurance that permeated the charged air. A quiet click, almost imperceptible, marked the final adjustment of an unseen detail, a signal that the orchestrated chaos had finally reached its natural pause, and Emma allowed herself a moment to process the cumulative tension, the lessons gleaned from observation, intuition, and careful choice. Dominic's hands relaxed at his sides, and the faintest hint of a smile flickered across his lips, recognition of the nuanced understanding Emma had demonstrated, a moral acknowledgement of her resilience, her insight, and the trust she had inspired without confrontation. The twins, sensing the change, released a tentative breath, the room shifting from a state of suspended alertness to one of measured calm, yet the memory of danger and revelation lingered in the corners, in the reflections of light, and in the charged atmosphere that had been carefully manipulated. Emma felt the subtle bond that had formed, the unspoken connection forged through shared perception and courageous action, and she understood that influence could emerge quietly, through observation and insight, rather than through dominance alone. The fiancé, though still cautious, seemed to accept the delicate balance now in place, and Dominic's acknowledgement underscored a shift in dynamic, a recalibration of power informed by respect and awareness rather than threat alone. In that moment, Emma recognized the depth of the emotional payoff, the sense of accomplishment and understanding that arose from navigating complexity with clarity, courage, and empathy. The room, once a theater of tension, deception, and uncertainty, now held a quiet resonance, a lingering echo of choices made and lessons learned, leaving a sense of reflection and anticipation that suggested even in calm, the shadows of insight and consequence would persist. Emma Collins exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease as the room settled into a fragile calm, the twins still clutching her sides, their small breaths steadying, a quiet trust now passing between them. Dominic Rourke remained near, his gaze softened yet watchful, a subtle acknowledgement of her courage and perception lingering in his expression, a recognition that the dynamics between them had shifted irreversibly. The fiancée stepped back, tension lingering in her posture, yet even she seemed to accept the delicate balance now in place, the room holding a silent understanding that the events had created a new equilibrium. Emma's eyes wandered across the polished floors, the reflections of light fractured by the chandelier, the subtle shadows a reminder of the paths taken, the choices made, and the hidden truths now revealed. She adjusted the twins gently, whispering calm words, embedding reassurance while allowing herself to absorb the weight of everything that had transpired. Dominic's lips pressed into a thin line, his presence steady, and Emma felt the quiet power of mutual understanding, the unspoken bond forged through shared awareness and courage. The room, once charged with uncertainty and layered deception, now seemed to hum with a measured calm, though hints of unresolved curiosity flickered in the corners, in the slight movements of objects, and in Dominic's watchful eyes. Emma understood that every decision had carried consequence, that the price of insight and protection had been exacting, yet she also recognized the growth, the strength, and the resilience that had emerged through navigating danger and deception. A subtle creak from the far hallway drew her attention, faint yet deliberate, a reminder that even in calm, the environment held secrets yet undiscovered, a lingering thread of anticipation. The twins' small hands tightened briefly around her sleeves, a comforting yet poignant reminder of responsibility, of care, and of the delicate trust placed upon her. Dominic's gaze flicked to the sideboard, then back to Emma, a silent conversation of awareness and respect passing between them, an acknowledgement that their interactions had created an enduring shift, an understanding that influence and authority were now intertwined with observation and perception. Light from the chandelier reflected across the polished surfaces one final time, highlighting details previously unnoticed, objects subtly out of place, shadows suggesting a story beyond what had been revealed, leaving Emma with the knowledge that the journey had changed them all. The room settled into quiet, yet the air held a residual energy, the tension softened but not entirely gone, as though the house itself had absorbed the lessons, the insights, and the decisions that had passed through it. Emma felt a calm determination within, a readiness for what might come next, tempered by the understanding that knowledge, courage, and trust could shape outcomes even in uncertainty. The twins leaned closer, Dominic remained poised, and in that shared stillness, a faint glimmer from a corner suggested that while the immediate dangers had passed, the story had more layers yet to unfold, a subtle signal that the path forward would continue to test perception, courage, and the fragile balance of power. Emma Collins exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the house lift slightly as the final threads of tension unraveled. The twins nestled safely against her side, their small breaths even and calm, their trust unshaken despite the ordeal they had endured. Dominic Rourke moved with quiet decisiveness, the sharp edge of authority softened by recognition of Emma's insight and courage, a subtle nod passing between them that spoke volumes without a word. The fiancée relaxed slightly, tension still lingering but lessened, acknowledging the new balance, a harmony born from clarity and understanding rather than confrontation. Emma's eyes scanned the room one last time, noting the fractured reflections on the marble, the slight tilt of objects that had once carried hidden significance, and she allowed herself a moment to absorb the gravity of what had been revealed, the consequences accepted, the mysteries unraveled. Dominic's presence remained commanding yet tempered, his gaze on Emma conveying acknowledgement, and a shared understanding that had transformed the dynamics completely. The twins shifted slightly, their hands curling around her sleeves, and Emma whispered gentle assurances, embedding calm into the room as a layer of resilience and trust. Every shadow, every reflection, every glimmer of light now held a story, a lesson, a reminder of the choices made and the courage exercised, each element of the environment resonating with the outcomes of perception and action. The room was still, yet alive with subtle energy, the silence heavy but comforting, and Emma felt the quiet power of knowledge and empathy, the culmination of insight and responsibility that had guided her through each moment. Dominic's lips pressed into a thin, deliberate line, a silent affirmation of her competence and the shift in equilibrium, and the fiancée's hesitant nod suggested a newfound respect for the quiet authority Emma had asserted. The chandelier above swayed gently, casting fractured beams across the polished floor, the light illuminating subtle details that once hinted at deception but now marked clarity, resolution, and understanding. Emma straightened, holding the twins' hands firmly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and connection, the room echoing with the emotional payoff of courage, observation, and careful action. Each breath she took carried reflection, each glance reinforced the lessons learned, and the atmosphere held a resonance of insight, accountability, and the tempered trust now shared between them. In the lingering quiet, a soft, almost imperceptible creak from a distant hallway reminded her that while immediate dangers had passed, life in the house would always carry layers of observation, choice, and consequence. Emma looked at Dominic once more, a silent understanding passing between them, a recognition that influence and respect had been forged through action, perception, and unwavering resolve. The twins smiled faintly, a small gesture that carried immense reassurance, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, a signal of emotional triumph and connection. As she guided them gently toward the center of the room, she understood the truth of what they had experienced, that courage and insight could alter even the most rigid hierarchies, that observation and care could create lasting impact, and that trust earned through thoughtful action was the strongest force of all. And in that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, a final echo of the lesson carried silently in the light and shadow, that power and empathy, when balanced with wisdom, could shape outcomes beyond expectation, leaving a moral imprint that lingered long after the last movement.